Hi everybody, this is Sukana this side. Sukana writes, I'm going live today by my alternate account, which used to be private but now it's gone public because of some glitch that's going on in my account. So here today, I'm here today in my live talking to very good historian. I would like to tell something about himself. Uh, I'm going to be going live with Raghavan Srinivasan, who is a BTech in Chemical Engineering from Madras University and a postgraduate in MBA from McMaster University, Canada. After working as a system analyst in TCS, he worked as a freelance IT professional before deciding to become an entrepreneur and social activist. He's the author of 5 books. He's passionately interested in history and philosophy. So, without further ado, I'm going to invite him to the live. Hello, sir.
Hi.
Welcome,
Nice to meet
welcome, Dr. Srinivasan, sir. Today we are here to talk about your book, Indian Cities, Ancient and Medieval, which is published by Hatchet India. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Unfortunately, we couldn't go online from here, from my usual account because of some glitch. But without further ado, we will start with my very first question. Since you have written about, it's non-fiction, and you've written about Indian cities, which uh, I, as a student, also studied in, when I was in, I think, grade 6 or 7. So, what inspired you to write about ancient and, medieval Indian cities, for that matter? Not just any ancient and Indian, but specifically Indian cities. What was your drive?
Yeah. Firstly, before answering that question, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this interview. And I'm very happy that I know from your posts that you are an appreciator of history, architecture, probably. So there's someone here who understands the subject. So it is
Yes,
always a
absolutely.
pleasure to talk about that subject. So thanks so much. Yeah, your question that how come I came to write this book is that see, this is my uh, fifth book, and I have written a couple of non-fiction and a couple of fiction. And so when I approached Hachette, they they started a series, So this is called the Quick and Concise series. Okay? So it is the first volume of that series. There are going to be many books in that series. So the idea was to give a quick picture of a particular subject, whether you take Indian cities, Indian philosophy, and so on. So I was very interested, and when I was asked to give a proposal, I first chose Indian cities because one thing is I did one literature search and found that there are not many books which cover the entire history of Indian cities, from the Harappan to the medieval stage. There are lots of books. One, they pertain to a particular period. There are
Mm-hmm.
books on Harappa and the Indus Valley civilization. There are other books which are about the Mauryan cities and all that. So that is one thing I thought that if I can bring everything together, but at the same time take a particular time frame, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So cities have evolved, and if you look at modern cities, it is quite difficult to treat them. There are so many thousands of cities in India. So I took the ancient and medieval cities, and there are about 35 cities described in this book. Okay.
Okay.
So that was also a big problem. How to select this
Mhm.
35 cities
Yeah.
on what basis? Okay. So that is one question, and we thought that my idea was, you know, to not take on the cities as individual entities, as something separate. So then you start looking at one city and then comment on that. So I wanted to connect them, and I felt that it should be some kind of uh, uh, a cross between uh, purely academic approach to the cities and then a narrative story-like approach. So I sort of grouped them and tried to connect the dots. Tried to see whether there are some similarities between the cities, of a particular period in time, and do they have a similar architecture? Do they have a similar kind of forts, built-in defense systems, and roads and drainage and all that? So it was an interesting exercise. So I think that after having brought out this book, it should be very useful. It is quite different from other books which exist on Indian cities. They're all very good in their own uh, area and sphere. Like there is a very good book on the architecture of Indian cities, but that is quite an academic book concentrating only on the architectural aspects by Dilip Chakrabarti. So these are all some references that I used. But on the whole, I felt that when you present cities in a concise way, uh, you know each city is about 5 to 6 pages, easy to read. Then I bring in the mota
Absolutely.
points of that city. So
I remember
that is
writing
one.
that. I remember writing that in my review that somebody who has not liked reading about dates or about history, this is a perfect book for them. But something I also wrote in my review and I also observed while I was reading it was that you have covered a lot of South cities that where you have the Chola kingdom and in the medieval era that comes, and before that how the trade started in the south cities. Because normally when I go back to the history that I was taught during my graduation and in my how would you say 11th and 12th standards, we usually just covered the not basis of the Harappan Punjab side of it. But your book, what it does is that it also is that yes, this was there, this was found, but there were the other aspects of in the Indian subcontinent itself, where the south states come in picture, where you have covered these things. So my next question is that how challenging was it for you to actually research on something as hard hitting and something so how would you say deep and very in lot of I think grit is required to do such finesse research. So what were the difficulties that you faced while researching?
Yeah, one before coming to the difficulties, that first point you made is very important, because you find books either on mostly on North Indian cities or even in North Indian cities. When you call North India and above the Godavari, so it is still concentrated on the Indus Valley civilization because there's a lot of information available on the architecture of that, not so much on the life of the people and all that. And the Mauryan cities, because they're very popular, they're very big, and Mauryan cities are fairly well documented right from the beginning. So that is very important. The existence of documentation of cities is important to write about the cities. And you cannot write some stories. It's not mythology. It is proper science. So you have to write it with whatever you have to give evidence. Who is saying that, and did you find it? Whatever you're talking about cities, is it inscriptional evidence or is it archaeological evidence? So in that way, South Indian cities are, I agree, not well covered in many of the works. So that is why that is one thing I thought that the cities of the Deccan and the South Indian cities I should cover, and I gave sufficient number of pages for them. So when doing that, it was very interesting, the South Indian cities. That originally the thought was that the South Indian cities came much later than the North Indian cities. The idea, the initial data available was that cities like Mathura and Hastinapura and all were there for much longer period on from the time of the Buddha or even before. So, but recent archaeological evidence has pointed out that South Indian cities also existed from about 500 BCE to 400 BCE. That means about 2,500 years back. So they existed, and now a lot of archaeological evidence. There is increasing evidence that there are so many cities like Kathiradi, and you would have heard of digging up many places in the south near Madurai, near Tirunelveli, and all. So new discoveries are being made every time, and it is pointing out like now the research is not only based on inscriptional and archaeological. You can also do a lot of carbon dating and genetic research on the bones and food particles available and all that. So you get some idea of the migration of populations and the composition of the cities at that point in time. So that is one point, that taking up South Indian cities, and there is still not so much information available, but there is enough now. So that is why I took up the cities of the Deccan and the south, both in the Sangam period and later during the Chola Empire and all that. And with the difficulties that you are asking, yes, it was these were the difficulties. See, what happens is that any city, for that matter, which has lived for tens of centuries, like Mathura and all. Some cities have existed from 2,500 years back. So how do you? They were not at a standstill. No, they evolved, and at one point in time, the cities were under one regime or a particular kind of city was there. Then after that, they changed. So one has to read that entire history of that city from beginning to end. And then try to see where to place them. Like I had that difficulty. Like a city like Madurai, for example, which chapter should I place Madurai? Should it be in the Sangam period, or should it be in the Pallava period, or in the Chola period? Because it has existed all the while and changed over a period of time. It was the capital. So these are the problems that I had in collating. And also, like I said, there is no one single book where all these are already dealt with, no textbook, no kind of published material covering all these 35 cities. So I have to refer to many kinds of books, gather many of them together and try to see and sort of draw a map, timeline map, that in this period, like say 1,500 years ago, these are the cities which existed at that time, and try to compare. It was an interesting exercise on the whole.
So, coming to the format of your book, it's not like you have written everything in, big sentences. You have actually divided the book into chapters, like you just specified, and at the end of every chapter, you have given takeaways, which is my favorite part, because sometimes what happens that when we open a history book, we don't want to read the entire thing, and I felt that, oh my god, this is something that will actually attract a young reader, because I know so many young readers who run away from history, and it's a very integral part to come to think of it, that if we are not reading about history and if we don't know our history, then we don't actually somewhere or the other, we don't know where we come from. So it becomes very important, and that's why I felt that Indian cities especially the Indian subcontinent, was very important to read. So the takeaways were a delight to read after reading the entire chapter. So how did this format
Yeah,
come about, and what was the thought process behind it?
yeah. Basically, it is because of this this quick and concise series. They had a format. Uh, Anirban, who was my editor who guided this entire thing from Hachette. So we worked on it together, and we felt that it should not be a textbook. A textbook is chronological and gives a lot and lots of details with no pictures, no box items. So we thought we should make it light. At the same time, some for a quick reader, give just takeaways. Takeaways are a favorite of all students who don't want to read the entire book. So they want to prepare for the exam, and last minute, you just look at the takeaway pages and go to the exam. So, but this is not for a student.
Exactly.
This is also for a reader who sort of reads the thing and then tries to recall. So it is one way good. We also pushed in some questions for those who are really serious and want to attempt. Uh, uh,
The fact test
these
part
are
is
all,
also a favorite of mine. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, that it is in between. So that is what it is, a hybrid. It is between a textbook
Yeah.
and a reference book
Yeah.
and a non-fiction. So that is why that is how we have kept it. Hope we have been successful at it. So let's see.
So
It
my
has
next
been going very well so far. So,
Yeah. My next
yeah,
question is around how did you approach the challenge of reconstructing the history of these ancient cities? What was the big challenge on building, because they had all, of course, broken down at some point and vanished from the earth unless until when they were found back again. So what was the challenge when you were putting these chapters and or putting these cities together back again for your book?
yeah, that's true. The cities are of different. They had different lifespans. Some cities lasted only for centuries. Some cities lasted
Mm.
for very long period. So when a city lasts for a very long period, like you say, they they start as a village at one point in time, and they become a town, and then there is war. It's ravaged, or the river turns its course, and so they migrate. They set up another city very nearby, and so on. So a city, has a kind of a long history with breaks in between. So that is one challenge that I had. That, for example, a city like Mathura or Madurai, you know, it will, if you dig into um, for architectural evidence, if you dig a place under Mathura city, you have to go very deep, you know, because there will be several layers of civilization, one without the other. And each layer of
Mhm.
civilization would have been 100, 200 years, 300 years longer. So some cities have 7 layers, you know. So which means that in each layer there are some architectural objects, some pottery, bones, beads, something left in that layer to understand what was the culture, what was the level of development in terms of. So that means right from the um Iron Age, Copper, Bronze Age the to coming up to the Iron Age and all that. So there are so many layers, and in each layer you will find pottery and artifact belonging to that layer. So you'll have to sort of try to visualize how people lived during that time. What kind of implements did they use? What kind of hand tools? Were they agricultural or a hunter uh, uh, occupation? So these were the challenges for any city for that matter. So you have to read across many books. There are bits and pieces. You have to put them together. Sometimes there are big contradictions. Somebody says, no, 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 this is not the city. Like Patna, for example. Patliputra was, somebody says Patliputra is not exactly Patna, it was a few kilometers away, or it is exactly Patna. And so there are some controversies. So these can be sorted out only over a period of time with historical, archaeological facts. But more and more information is available now. So you'll have to decide and see how things work and do a lot of reading. So I've given a list of books at the end that will also help somebody wants to know a bit more, and you know,
Yes,
is
absolutely.
wants to punish themselves by reading more, they can do that. So there's a lot of books like
I'm
that.
sure there are many graduates and many I history students who would love to punish themselves because I know that there are a lot of students who actually like history, although it's we say in Hindi that it's badnaam hua hua hai, but yes, it is still a very integral part as I mentioned before. So, Srinivasan sir, I wanted to know from you that. Since you have just mentioned the list of the references, what are the challenges in researching about historical non-fiction? Because history has what I have realized over the last I would say 10 years is that history has many narratives and textbooks in schools have changed. There has been a big shift in how history has been perceived. But I would not go in the intellectual part of it. I would rather go into the architectural part of it. What was the challenges of you researching through these references, through these big books, and while you were researching for historical nonfiction? Because the architecture and who found what, this becomes a little bit hard. I mean, I think it becomes very hard to, okay, this is right. Because tomorrow somebody can, of course, get up and say that, no, what you've written is wrong. So, what did you think? But I know that you have also written in your book that this is not a textbook. This is something for you to get easier access to the Harappa, the Indian cities of ancient and medieval times. But what would you say about the historical nonfiction part? What challenges do you feel that the coming generation would also find, and you also went through when you were writing this book?
Yeah, writing non-fiction, both have their own uh, problems and in a way the author's comfort level. Okay? So fiction and non-fiction, there's a lot of difference. I won't say that something non-fiction is difficult to write and fiction is easy to write. It's not like that.
Hmm.
Both have their
Hmm.
own challenges. But one thing is you have to keep in mind when you write non-fiction, very clear perspective that you are researching properly. Without research, you cannot make statements in non-fiction. In mythology and in fiction, you can concoct stories. Okay, that is a story. The author himself or herself says that I'm telling you a story, so don't believe in everything. This is my story. So somebody can say
Yes,
Harappa and
absolutely.
the Aryans were the same. Then somebody can say that somebody migrated from here and not from outside, and somebody can say the Harappans and Tamilians are the same. So all this can be in non-fiction. You can write stories, right? You can talk about all kinds of things that are happening in that period of time, magic and black magic and tantra and all that kind of thing. So a fiction writer, he has to make it interesting, and it all depends on how you hold the interest of the reader while telling a plausible story. Whereas in non-fiction, when you write a story,
Mhm.
it has to be pakka, it has to be based on evidence, and it has to be scientific in the sense that you should have searched all the evidence, and if the references are different, then you present 2, 3 views on that. This is what is happening. somebody is saying about this, somebody is saying about that, but I believe in this. So you sort of present the picture and giving a lot of references and then finally your own idea. Otherwise, what will happen when, because I was, when I took on this subject, I knew that it was a massive subject. There are big authors, there are established historians and archaeologists who have written big books, they're well established. So when you write one Indian cities, they should not point to some big flaw in the way I handle things. So I have to be very careful and study what is already existing. And unless I have discovered myself, I went and dug some new architectural uh, place and found some new things, or I read through the inscriptions and totally different, found something different. I did research, so then I have a right to say that I did this research and this is what I believe. This is what came out of that. Other historians can contradict or agree with it. Okay. But this is not original research. I didn't go and actually dig more into those architectural sites. Whatever information was already there, I studied inscriptions, I studied translations of existing manuscripts. And so with all this, I put together. Okay. So there may be still flaws in that, but maximum care has been taken, I feel, in widely reading material, discussing with people. So that is one aspect that a non-fiction writer should be very careful about. They cannot write what they have in mind, and they cannot twist history. They cannot go back and change something, because so far history is based on actual evidence. Some evidence you should have inscriptional or architectural or this carbon dating. So that is one thing that taught me that we don't be partial or biased in the way you present. Study everything, present all the facts, and then leave it to the reader to judge what is right. So that is one thing I have attempted.
This is something of the the questions I was going to ask you, but there has been a rise of lot of how would you say trade publishers, the big publishers, or even the small ones, leaning towards writing about how would you say Dravidian history, and coming from and then further going through Tamil or going through different states. So what do you feel or what do you personally feel that what gave that push, and or is it something that has come organically where we are reading more about the South, and even in fiction there are a lot of translations, and here also, like you have talked about the trade, the barter that happened through the Mauryan and the South states. So, what do you feel that gave that push, or that that inclination towards the reading about South and South's history?
Yeah, that is again a probing question. See, there are a lot of translations available, and it is very difficult to cut across, cultures and languages, because if you see North Indian history, all history exists in Sanskrit or Pali or Brahmi script or some things like that. So it is a different set of evidence available, and translations are available, and it is not just enough to read the translation; you have to understand the context also. Okay, same with Tamilian cities and inscriptions. So they're not just inscriptions; they are also bring the culture of that place. So little bit here and there. It is not enough just to see architectural evidence and inscription. You also need to read the literature of that period. You have to read the Tamil epics and the Tamil poetry, the Sangam poetry, to get a feel for the culture there. Otherwise, you can very sort of without masala, you can describe a city with in a very sort of dry way, because the city is not just buildings and monuments. It is to do with the people there, the way they live, their culture, their language. It has to capture that essence, all that. So that is one aspect that I researched on. I can read Tamil very well and go through even those age-old Tamil texts with a little bit of translation. I can do that. Sanskrit is more difficult. Uh, you have to read with the translation and little bit try to understand here and there. So, but it helps when you read to that. My uh, regret in writing these Indian cities is that certain parts of India I could not cover because of my lack of knowledge. Like the whole, I have not covered even one city from West Bengal, but because I have to study that. You have to. Like Orissa, for example, is very underrepresented here. It has such a the Kalinga Empire had so many cities and so many. There's a big history of the Kalingas. So I left out that, and there are many empires in West Bengal. In Maharashtra, there are many things. Of course, I covered Ajanta and all that, but each thing, like I didn't cover Jammu and Kashmir, I didn't cover much of Punjab other than the Harappan civilization. So each cultural area has its own story to tell, and you require a very broad understanding uh, of the text and of the available material and of the landscape there at a particular point in time, who ruled Punjab or how was the transition that happened and all that. So Indian Empire stretched even up to Afghanistan, right? And probably beyond Tajikistan and all that. So you can talk about cities like I have talked to Lahore, but beyond that, you know, there were Indian cities at that point in time, beyond Takshashila and beyond Lahore. So these are all some aspects. If I were to publish a second edition of it, I would certainly like to add a few more cities. Those underrepresented regions, I would like to.
So, my next question is related to this because you said that there are certain cultures you couldn't see. But while you were researching, were there any cities or were there any stories that resonated with you while you were researching for writing Indian cities, ancient and medieval? Any city or stories, something?
Yeah, about the cities themselves, there was something which I discovered when I read deep into them. Like, for example, one knows that the Indus Valley civilization was very huge and broad, and the big cities, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, very old ancient cities and all that. But the extent of uh, their the coverage, the extent of that civilization, and also their place in the world civilization at that time, and all that was very interesting. When you dig deeper into that, one understands that in that 5,000 years back we are talking about now, unimaginable. Like even 100 years back, what happened we don't remember, but 5,000 years back there were there was this huge civilization, and even greater than the Mesopotamian civilization, which was its contemporary, and spread over more than 1 million square kilometers. So just imagine that there are about 1,500 cities and towns spread over that vast area that is called the Indus Valley civilization. Now it's called Harappan civilization because it was not limited only to the Indus Valley. It was spread out even beyond that, up to Gujarat. And so this knowing about that more, and also very interesting fact is that the population at that point in time, 5,000 years back, in Harappa was about 40,000 people lived there, it seems. So it is a
Mhm.
huge kind of and comparable to at that point in time the Mesopotamian cities. They were the you know the comparable civilization existing at that time. And, so there was a lot of trade between them. Initially, in fact, when those who found the Harappa ruins, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, started thinking, and it was basically the British. The British archaeologists brought science to India. Scientific way of digging and finding out about the cities. But at the same time, they also brought that colonial bias. For them, they were always wondering how come Indians achieved that greatness at that point in time. So those who discovered the Harappan ruins initially thought that they were all built by Mesopotamians, by the Europeans. But later on, it became
Um,
clear that the two civilizations were very different. You know, the Harappan civilization grew on its own. It was not built by anybody, and it had very huge structures, its own people, its method of thing. No, the thing to notice about Harappan civilization is that even though it is spread over 1 million square kilometers at that point in time, 5,000 years back, they had a standard measurement, standard scales, weights, sizes, height, so many things. They built roads only of a particular size. They had bricks of a particular standard size. They had seals of a particular standard size. So everything was standardized over that huge vast area, which means that the kind of communication they had at that time, the kind of trade, uh, that must have been really great to ensure that kind of standardization with they don't like today they don't have mobiles, phones, cars, gadgets, and all that. But without all that, just moving around in carts, they established that kind of standardization across all the sites in the Indus Valley. So that is a fantastic thing to learn about. You know. So there are many interesting aspects. Like in Tirunelveli, I found that when they dug up, you know, near Tirunelveli and did genetic research, the, they found a lot of Austro, Australian Asian uh, migration into Tirunelveli. At that point in time, that is about 2,500 years back, during at the period of the Sangam period, there were
mhm.
already
Okay.
Australasian population in Tirunelveli settled in there. So that means that there was sea trade and people had come from other continents and settled there. So it was a mixed kind of race at that point in time. So all this shows that there was a heavy amount of trade and communication and connection between even continents, leave alone cities within a country. They had across continents they could communicate. They had boats and probably bigger boats which can, go thousands of kilometers into the sea. So they may have migrated slowly from one part to another part, but still it shows that sea migration and land migration both were there. So these are all very interesting things when you really get into the archaeological reports and study them. Those are very
Okay.
good, interesting information.
That is for sure. So, your book, like I have said earlier in the live itself, your book is this thin and it's very interesting. So, I'm recommending this to. I have been recommending this book to everybody who does not want to read big chunks of books, because it's very light and very interesting, and lots of information is available there. So, what would be your message to the readers, that what will they gain out of reading this book? What would you say to them? Because this book deserves a lot of readers, and it surely has gained over the last 2.5 years. So, what would you say to them?
most important thing is that we should learn our history. Okay? One, we get confidence when we know that we have a history, we have a rich culture, heritage, and all. Secondly, we learn from past mistakes. At one point in time, such big civilizations, such world-renowned cities were there. Now look at our cities; they are full of, problems of sanitation, climate change, so many things happening. A city cannot manage its water supply. It is not sustainable. People live in a very unsustainable way. So when you learn about the earlier cities, at that point in time, they would have had so many problems. We now have technology, but they didn't have technology. And how did they then build a sustainable city? How did they manage their water? Like uh, cities like Harappa and Dholavira, for example, which managed their water supply so well, and they had wells. And they were so particular about sanitation and hygiene, even in those days. There were baths in every city, communal baths and even individual baths. So they were all so eager. That means that they paid a lot of attention to the health of the citizens. And that is very important to learn about today's cities. Second important thing is that many cities I noticed, particularly the Indus Valley civilization, that most people lived within the compound of the city. There was a wall around the city with its own citadel, palace, and all that. Harappan cities were very equitable. They didn't have, as far as we know, they didn't have a palace, king's palace and hut for the fishermen. They didn't have like that. The houses all seemed to be standardized, and people were living there, and all the people were living within the compound. No stray houses outside the compound. That means that everybody had a right to be within the city walls. But now look at the cities, that the main part of the city, only those who can afford to buy a house can live in the main part of the city. Others are all kicked out to the outskirts, to slums. Even within the city, you have one slums. This question of watering the cities, making waters for different people started much later, when the empires came and, so they had a royal quarters and they had a noble's quarters and they had a traders quarters and fishermen quarters. And some people were outside the city. They cannot come in because they were pariahs and they were untouchables, or they were hunters and fishermen. So they were not integrated into the main city. All this you cannot find in the Harappan civilization. There was no such thing. At least archaeological evidence suggests that there was no such thing at that point in time. So somewhere later on, all this came into being: the rich and the poor, and cities getting, people living in sections, and so divided from each other. And so these are all things which we need to keep in mind and learn from the earlier cities, and look towards a city where people live in comfort, with equity, with nobody is discriminated against, and then the cities are sustainable and environment friendly. And we keep in mind our future generations. So these are some aspects I would say that the readers would appreciate. And that is one point. And I write history. I like history a lot, and I write history because I feel that we should learn from history, and see history can change the way we live today, or our beliefs. So the more we learn about our past, there's no civilization which exists without a past, right? Civilization which doesn't have a past has to learn everything new. So that is one wonderful thing that India has. It has a good past in terms of culture, literature, cities, in terms of philosophy. So we should learn that. And my attempt is to bring that to the readers. Try to bring several aspects of Indian life, Indian history to the readers in a readable way. So that is something that is a takeaway. That's I feel that the book. I would be very happy if readers write to me saying that, this is, I learned something from this book. I compared with the way we are living today, and we need to change. So that is the change that I
Yes.
expect from reading this book.
So, what's in store next for you? What are we going to read next by you? Any hints?
The next book you're asking, the next,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
am,
yes. Next.
I am into, I am, this book publishing is like one, pipeline. So once you get into it, as an author, you have to keep on. It is like a movie actor, or it is like if you miss out for 1 year, you're gone. Nobody remembers you. So you have to keep on writing something and keep on publishing. So my next book is will be coming out next month. It is on Indian philosophy. It will be again in this
Mm-hmm.
series, the quick and concise series. There's
Okay.
the second.
Okay.
There are other authors writing for the series, but I am writing my second book for the series. It is on Indian philosophy. So I try to sort of describe the history of Indian philosophy from very
That's
ancient times. Like this, I
interesting.
go back to Harappa, and from the time of Harappa, what has been our
We
life.
all Yeah, we all
Pardon?
study Socrates' philosophy, and but
Yeah, yeah,
nobody dwells so deep into Indian philosophy. Yes, I think that would be a very
yeah,
interesting book to read. Pick up from a bookstore and read it. So,
yeah.
I also would like to. I know it's a Indian cities. We talk about Indian cities, but I would also like to talk about your fiction that you wrote last year, Dog by Pursuit. I read that book. It was very. I really loved it. So that's my fan moment. But yes, this is it from my side. Thank you so much, sir. This was a lovely conversation, and I'm sure that the next book that's coming, we are all going to be very much um invested and very much excited to pick it up and read more about Indian philosophies and something Indian, as you did with Indian cities, ancient and medieval. Thank you so much for
Thank
this conversations. Despite the hindrances that happened with the technology, as you have mentioned, we managed to have this conversation. So thank you so much,
thank
and
you.
we will, of course, be in touch. And yes, that's it from my
Thank
side. Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you, Sukanya. And
Thank you.
I love the interview, and I hope that when my next book comes, we can do an interview on that book also. So I look forward to that.
Yes,
Thank you so much
absolutely.
for organizing.
I would love to. Yes. Okay. Okay.
So
Bye bye, sir.
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to those who watched this video. I hope this will be available so we can, lot of those who are not able to join today,
Yes.
we can put it up in
Yeah.
YouTube or someplace.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Surely.
Thanks so much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody who joined us.